So, welcome to the to picking up on the last point where we have been. So again, third time after some recording issues, we are now at the topic of TLS. So looking into how processes can establish a secure connection between each other. Then we will have a look at IPsec, where basically hosts will have a secure, confidential, integer communication. And then we go one layer deeper into the link layer, where basically this one-hop communication between the hosts and the routers and switches is looked at, and specifically at wireless mobile networks, namely Wi-Fi and 4G networks. Okay, let's go quickly about what we've learned last time about TLS. So we look at the requirements. Basically what we focus on is on a security protocol above the transport layer. So basically it allows two processes to authenticate each other and to establish keys that they use for encrypted communications or for confidentiality, so that nobody else is able to read what is sent, that nobody is able to modify the messages without being detected, and to authenticate the involved parties. And what we have also talked about is that often in applying cryptography we have some kind of some kind of hybrid approach, where basically we use we want to use symmetric encryption for encrypting our messages, because asymmetric encryption with public keys is too time consuming. So basically we want to derive somehow easily some symmetric key that we can use throughout the communication for encrypting our messages. Then we want to somehow sign the messages to have integrity, but for that we don't want to sign the whole message and be depending on the size of the message, but we first want to create a hash, where we basically, this is a function which gets some input of unbound size, and it derives a fixed size bit sequence, let's say 160 bits, which is representative for the input, and it's very hard to calculate back from the given hash to a potential input. So it's a one-way function. So that can be used as kind of placeholder, really identifying the original content. So it's very difficult to fake this, and it's sufficient to sign this hash. And finally, authentication, which involves certificates, and which involves some kind of information of who the persons are and the involved parties. There we have public keys for. Okay. So let's have a look at what we learned, what we first require, what we first use is typically, if you want to communicate with a website, then you use HTTPS. So you use some TLS supported connection establishment, so that you can have a authenticated secure communication to this website. And typically the web servers then use certificates to identify who they are and why they are associated to a specific domain. So basically it's supporting it gives you a public key, and it gives you basically the domain name and also who the subject is, so basically who you are communicating with. But importantly, it verifies that it's the owner of the domain, so that you are communicating with this entity. And typically you have the subject details there, so basically it lists you who that is. It lists you who has verified that the domain is really belonging to that specific organization, and it is signed by the issuer. So basically the issuer is here, for example, VeriSign. And then typically you have this kind of tree structure, where let's say you have a domain which is authenticated by a issuer, which is a certificate authority, and this certificate authority is also verified by another certificate authority, and you have this kind of tree structures. And at the top level basically they are the root certificates who are verified and checked and authenticate, basically verified by the browser producers whom they trust, whom they say they will trust their certificates. So at the end, the browser companies like Microsoft and Apple and Google with Chrome and Firefox with the Mozilla Foundation, they decide who gets to be selected basically as trustworthy, and their root certificates are accepted. Okay, let's see what TLS does. Basically, what such a typical, let's say, toy TLS protocol should have is, first of all, you need some kind of handshake where you exchange your certificates, so you verify at least often in practice the server that's always online is to verify itself, and they need somehow to provide who they are and to verify that they are really these persons and not just faking it. And then they need to derive some kind of shared secret. So basically to have some foundation for the symmetric encryption later on. With the key, basically, yeah, so you don't want to use always the same key, so you don't always, at least don't want to use the public keys of the involved persons, because that would then be attackable by replay attacks, or to repeat the communication, or to try to predict what kind of information might be transferred. So you want to have always nice, fresh secrets, and you want to have several keys. As we have seen with the asymmetric cryptography, with the public key cryptography, you have a public key that you can use to encrypt something. You have the private key that you could use, if you encrypt with that, to sign something, and you have both parties, so in total you have 4 keys, and for that you also ideally want to use 4 keys. Okay, then let's say once we have our keys established, we have some longer going data transfer where the keys are used, and at the end we have the connection closure, which ends the communication, so that it does not just disappear the communication, so we want to really close it. Okay, so somewhere here would be the assumption where we left, I think 1 or 2 slides further on. So basically, if Bob wants to communicate with Alice, they first have this TCP handshake that they want to communicate with each other. With the last message of the handshake, they can already send a payload. Let's say they have this connection establishment. Alice could send her public key, and this could be somehow used for master secret that is then used to generate all other keys. So the assumption is you have the master secret, and from that all the other keys are derived, such as for the encryption, but also for the integrity of the messages, and in both directions. So this is in one direction and this is in the other direction. Of course, here we have the problem. No, we don't have the problem, because in this case only Alice verifies herself, authenticates herself. This is typically the case when, let's say, Alice is a server with a clear IP address, with a domain name, and the client who's accessing that web server is typically not authenticated. But TLS would also support that. Again, we are still in our toy example. So what we typically have, as I said, we don't want to use the same key. We want to have different keys for integrity and encryption, so confidentiality. And we have different directions. So basically it's from client to server and from server to client. So at the end we have 4 keys, but they have to be known to both parties. That's the joys The joy of lecturing. So, schauen wir mal. Was ist so? So we have some, okay. So, and how do we derive these keys? So we have some kind of master secret that needs to be exchanged somehow. And we have some key derivation function. So we basically take this KDF function, put in the master secret, and then we get all these 4 keys. Okay. There's also some additional random data that is used. Basically this you can share. You can somehow distribute by different means, and you can add some new random data to. The goal is every time you have this handshake, you want to have a new set of keys. The idea is, let's say this is time and you have one communication session. There you have a specific set of keys. Then the next time you have the handshake, you communicate, you have another set of keys. And in the case that one of these keys might be corrupted and might be leaked to Trudy, then she can only read this part of the communication but not the whole. Okay, so what did we see? Let me just see, have we been here? Yes, I think we have been here. Okay, so I think here was it where we roughly ended. So let's see what kind of setup do we have. So typically again we have TCP, that means we have a byte stream, so that means this is time and somehow this is also bytes. So we have some kind of constant flow of bytes coming along. So the question is, how do we encrypt the data that is written into the TCP socket, because it's continuous, and where should the MAC, so the message authentication code, go? So there's no end of the message, there's no end of the datagram. So that would not really work, because we cannot put it at the end. If the message takes, the communication takes 2 hours or so, then it's very much too late. So what is done is basically this communication is broken into chunks and records, and each client to server record basically carries some kind of MAC, message authentication code, that is verifying that short snippet of data using the key that has been selected for it. And on the other side, when the receiver gets this records, then it just looks at the data and computes whether this message authentication code is really verifying the data. What this message authentication code does is basically, because it uses a specific key that only Alice and Bob knows, you know, if the MAC, if valid, then let's say Bob receives the message and the MAC to the corresponding data is valid, then it verifies that that Alice has been sending it because only she knew the key. And what the MAC also does is basically takes the data, you have to hash it, and then you use the key to sign it. And because it uses the hash function, it also verifies if the recipient computes the same MAC, that the data on the way has not been altered, has not been modified. So it provides both integrity, confirmation, and authentication. So confidential integrity and authentication through the MAC, and we also want confidentiality, so it's also encrypted with the symmetric key that is then sent. So basically what the recipient receives is an encrypted message that he can unpack. Then he sees this kind of structure. He can derive the data, can compute with the known key to use for method authentication, can compute the hash, can compute the signature to it, can verify that the MAC is correct, and then knows the message was confidential because it was encrypted, and the authentication of the sender is provided because only that key is needed to compute it correctly, and the data has not been modified because the hash is still correct. Okay, so what could such a simple TLS example, how could it be attacked? So what if messages are reordered? So what if, let's say, 2 records are individually authenticated and verified, but if we reorder them, so what is then also done is there's some kind of sequence numbers in unencrypted TCP header that are not secured that the attacker could do, or there's some kind of replay attack. So if this is a sequence with the message authentication and the encryption and so on, let's say, I don't know, A and B, so B can be sent again. So that would, with our current approach, let's say, be possible. So how to react on this? The records also contain TLS sequence numbers, so they do not assume that TCP has the sequence numbers at the right place. So it also numbers them, and in case of there's a repetition, you can react to it if you see there's some reordering, because let's say the record of 2 has been sent prior to the record of 1. You can detect it and exchange the order again. And so you can address these kind of challenges. And for the last step, for the connection close, so what, for example, an attacker could try is to force a TCP connection by sending a TCP message with the FIN flag set. There can also be some kind of truncation attack, where basically the attacker, so this is the resource record with the MAC, and the attacker modifies the header in a way that it tells that the packet ends earlier. Then the packet is corrupted, but might have influence on the communication. Okay, so what to do there? So because this TCP FIN flag for finishing the communication is so critical, so basically you also want to save this one and protect it. So what is done is to take a specific record type for signaling closure. So because these record types are protected against malicious modification and forgery, you basically take all relevant control flow information for this TLS connection within the secured space, and have specific messages for it. Okay, so how is that working? So basically you have and that should be somewhere the sequence number. So what is done now is that the message authentication code is not just referring to the data, but also to the type and the sequence number, and basically everything that is sent. So if anything of this is modified, then the modification is detected, and by basically fixing the sequence number with this and fixing the closure type, an attacker cannot modify it without detection. And if it's detected, then of course this can be thrown away and then basically communicated as an attack. Okay, so far to our ideas of how to build such a transport layer security approach. Let's see how the exact details of the TLS protocol are. Again, so what's the purpose of TLS? The purpose of TLS is to provide a secure connection between processes. And basically it uses for that a TCP, and on top of it, it provides the functionality of TLS. So basically what you have is you have here the API to establish sockets and to receive messages and so on. And so the socket API, and HTTP, let's say, interacts with it. TLS provides the same API so that other layers can interact with it, but in addition uses the API from below and adds some more functionality. There are also some newer protocols, but we won't go in much detail on this, which basically incorporate TLS as well. So quick is basically the idea to have some kind of TCP features, have some kind of TLS features, but much quicker on top of UDP. So where you basically still have some kind of transport layer protocol, but very simple and lightweight, and everything that you need and that basically has been shown as successful is recombined in quick to be quicker but with the same properties, same qualities. So typically, yeah, we will not go into detail, but just to visualize you how the APIs and the layerings are. So basically TLS is an application protocol using TCP, but providing also the transport layer API to other applications. Okay, so otherwise this is from the layering, and from the setup it is as we have seen, it has this handshake to basically identify who are communicating, to have some way to exchange the master key that allows you to derive the keys. You have the negotiation in the handshake about the cipher suites to use, and just one word on this. So basically, if the handshake at the time that the handshake is set up, so basically what happens is that the client first communicates what kind of it wants to know what kind of cipher suites are supported. So typically in TLS prior to 1.3, there's this client hello, and there's the server hello, in which they communicate what kind of encryption mechanism they want to use. Just to show you also from the lab exercise how this looks like. So here we have here we have the handshake with the client hello and the server hello. Let me just see. Good. So what we have basically, sorry, once again. So we have here this handshake steps, where basically the client first connects to the server and communicates which cipher suites it supports. So basically it tells what kind of symmetric keys and key length and so on it selects and proposes to use, and the server tells what kind of cipher suite then actually to take, so that both agree on the same protocol that they want to use in the communication. There's also from the server the certificate and the server key exchange, server hello done, basically where it's closed. And here's, for example, where the server key parameters are further exchanged. There's I don't want to go too much into detail there, but basically there's at least the certificate of the server that validates who that is. So here in this case it's UMass www.cs umass.edu, giving all the information that it who that is, who this issuer is, that's signed and so on. Basically it provides the authentication information of the server. And what has changed from TLS 1.2 to 1.3 is that these large number of cipher options has been reduced to only 5 choices rather than 37 choices. Any idea why does this make that might be more secure to have less options? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. So if you take out the unsecure and more problematic options, then you are left with only the secure ones and the strongest secure ones. It requires Diffie-Hellman, so I think we will also catch this up in one of the later next lectures, how Diffie-Hellman works. Did you already have Diffie-Hellman's key exchange? Yeah, so maybe one not, one yes. So half of the class yes, half of the class no. Okay, so we'll pick it up. Yeah, let me just. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, maybe to very quickly describe what we want to have. We want to have some X, which is the key that both should use for encrypted communication. And so this is the basis for the key exchange. They have to have the same knowledge, and here we have Alice and here we have Bob. And they initially don't have the same key. They don't have X. But they want to agree on something. And there's Trudy in the middle who's able to listen. I think she cannot interfere, so she is able to listen. So basically, if they exchange messages, Trudy will also receive some information from that. Okay, so I hope that I summarized it quickly and correctly, most of all. So basically, what X will be is there's some generator and it's to the power of A and to the power of B. So basically, A, as Alice has some secret A, and B has some secret B. And Trudy doesn't know neither A nor B. And basically what A sends over is G to the power of A. So basically this is something, of course, not A. So Trudy cannot compute from this what A is. And B then takes these two and computes A, B. And B sends over G to the power of B. And Alice takes this and computes G to the power of A and B. And basically now they have the same X. But what Trudy received is GA and GB. And from this she does not come to the common secret because she doesn't know the exponents. So this is basically Diffie-Hellman, how you can publicly exchange some common secret, which is G to the power of A and B, taking your own secret and not exposing it because you only send basically this the computations to G to the power of your secret. And basically this is the main idea of the Diffie-Hellman key exchange. And what the protocol involves for Diffie-Hellman, you have to agree on a G so that you know in which domain you are computing. But other than that, that's basically it. And it lives from the property that for a given G to the power of A, it's not possible to derive A. And with these two inputs, GA and G to the power of A and G to the power of B, you cannot derive G to the power of A times B. Okay, so basically this is that's required for key exchange. It has some combined encryption and authentication algorithm instead of for data rather than serial encryption and authentication. So it's basically made some modifications, and it uses a secure hash as cryptographic hash functions. So it reduced the options of what kind of hash functions are able to be used. Okay, let's see. Now everything in TLS 1.3 is put into one round trip time for handshaking. It's basically the client tells, okay, these are my cipher suits that I support. This is my generator G for the Diffie-Hellman key agreement, and I have some further parameters that might be relevant. And now the server tells, okay, from your, I don't know, 5 options, I take option C. Okay, this is my GB. So let's say GA, and this is my GB, and some further parameters. So now the client knows which cipher suit they take. It can compute the via Diffie-Hellman the common key, and there's also the server signed signal certificate that verifies, okay, this is really, let's say, Amazon or so. And I'm not communicating with Trudy, but with that domain that I wanted to communicate with. And now the client checks its certificate. So is it really assigned to the domain that I wanted to communicate with? It generates from the commonly established keys all other keys, and now can next make a HTTPS GET request. So the next communication is already secure. Okay, so next time Alice wants to communicate to, let's say this is Alice, this is Bob. So the client wants to communicate to the server. It is even sufficient to just tell, okay, last time we agreed on C, and I don't know, this was a G and this is my GA. So here you have the data, HTTPS GET, and so they can resume earlier connections. It can already send encrypted application data, because it assumes that everything that is derived through this communication, so the server has some knowledge about the client, it has some knowledge about what kind of keys they had. So the last time GAB, so their master secret was this and that, and they derived this and that keys. So it is assumed that this kind of security knowledge is still available in the server, so that it can be directly used. And if there would be some changes, it can be still done, but otherwise the old and previous master secret from earlier connection can be used. Of course, this is some kind of security issue, because that master key might be corrupted, but still they have some approach of how to renew the master secret and the keys that they use, so that they don't use it all the time. As I said, it's still vulnerable to replay attacks, so whether this message has been really sent by the client or by somebody else, it does not verify who the client is. It just picks up on the old communication, and that might be vulnerable, but it may be okay. I mean, if there's no state, not modifying server state, just some read operation, maybe that is acceptable, depending on what basically this application prefers, basically speed over security. Okay, so far for TLS. So basically what you have seen is there's some usage of certificates to verify the server. There's some key exchange, maybe with Diffie-Hellman or some other approach, to get the master key from which they derive the 4 other keys, and then basically it's encrypted communication in one direction and authenticated and integer message authentication codes for the other security goals. So now we look into IPsec, which focuses on data level encryption authentication and integrity. So typically, let's assume you have some kind of control traffic, like for border gateway protocols, or some kind of yeah, relevant communication on maybe between two sites. So let's say you have here network A, network B. They should be connected through some kind of tunneling devices. Yeah, and there should be some permanent tunnel that connects the two sides. So typically you have two options, two modes. The first one is that you have only the datagram payload encrypted and authenticated, but basically everybody can see your IP address, your next protocol, your checksum and so on. Basically it's just a payload that's encrypted. And most of all, everybody can see the IP source and destination. So who's communicating with whom. Or there's a tunnel mode where you basically establish this kind of communication. So this is A, this is B, this is C and D. And the whole datagram is encrypted and encapsulated in a new datagram. Let's say the datagram is going from C to D, and all datagrams from A to B are basically taken as an envelope, put into another envelope, sent from C to D, and then reopened then again. And basically everybody spying on this connection only sees communication between C and D, but never between A and B. So it's totally encrypted, nothing is visible except that C and D are communicating, but that A and B are communicating we do not see. So this is then sent to D and then opened there. So these are the two uses, and basically there are two protocols defined for IPsec. They are different distance. So the first is the authentication header protocol, basically focusing on source authentication and data integrity, so that the recipient can verify who the sender is and that the data has not been modified. Any applications for that? So when would you like to have this kind of functionality? You authenticate the sender and that the data has not been modified. Where would you require something like this? But it is not confidential, so everybody can read it. So when do you not need confidentiality, but still the rest? Any ideas? Any half of the class have some kind of ideas? So for yeah, that's very good. So if the result is anyway public, so then you don't need confidentiality. But you want to verify that the sender is really the one whom you trust, and the message has not been modified on the way. So basically, that the message that you received is really intact and from the authenticated, trustful party. So, for example, if you have some kind of DNS request that you want to trust, basically, if somebody tells you this is a IP address for a specific domain, then you want to trust it. Or if you have some routing protocols such border gateway protocol or open shortest path first or so where you basically want to communicate between the hosts the shortest paths in the network. They will be obvious after that. So the shortest paths are not really that confidential, but you want to make sure that if the routers or switches take over this configuration information, then they take it from the right sender. So it's more really about having some kind of application where the authentication and the correctness of the data is very crucial. And then there's the second approach. There's the second approach. Where it's more about communication between two random parties, and you want to have authentication, you want to have data integrity, and you want to have confidentiality. So it's between A and B. I don't know. Okay, I don't know. This was the problem. Okay, this is more widely used because typically there are much more edge devices that want to communicate securely with each other than the core devices that want to have, where the authentication is in focus and not the confidentiality. Okay, so then what we have to have is before sending data, we need some kind of security association. What does that mean? That maintains state information. So basically you want to know who am I communicating with, so source and destination, and what keys are used, and so on. So basically for any Okay, so welcome to picking up this topic again. So we had some technical issues, I had to re-record it, so we have to go again through it. So what we are talking about now is IPsec, which basically corresponds at the network layer, where we have two hosts that might be routers or some end devices, and there might be also some further nodes on the path between them, but basically between two parties in this network layer there's some security envisioned. What IPsec should provide is encryption, so to have confidential data, authenticated communication, and integer, so that we detect if some of the bits have been modified. And that can be user traffic, but it can also be network layer specific control traffic, such as for routing or other kind of traffic. IPsec has basically two modes. One is the transfer mode, where we have a datagram that is encrypted and authenticated, but the metadata, meaning the header, remains seen and visible. So we only encrypt the payload. And if it's transferred over several nodes in between from one host to another, then at least the source node, source address and destination address and upper layer are still visible. The second approach is a tunnel mode, where basically two nodes on a path in a network decide to encrypt all their communication between each other and to provide the secure communication channel. So this will be then encrypted, authenticated, and then all this data will be encapsulated in a new datagram with new IP header tunneled to the destination. So if we have a message from A to B, just to characterize it this way, so it comes from A, it is distant to B, it is sent over to the router 1, and the router 1 now rewrites, so encapsulates the packet. It takes the old one with all critical information encrypted and rewrites the address of who's sending it and who shall receive it. And router 2 should receive it, and then it is unpacked again, and the second time, once it's unpacked, the original message is passed on. So all the nodes in between, they do not see that A has communicated with B. Okay, there are basically two main protocols in IPsec which have different purposes. One is the authentication header, or AH, and the encapsulation security protocol. And they have different goals. So basically the first one focuses on authentication and data integrity only. but not confidentiality. So it's the packet and the payload remains visible, but everything that is related to it guarantees who the sender is and that it has not been modified. So one of the applications for this is, for example, to communicate routing information. So if two routers in the network are communicating, let's say, the distance vectors, then the second router would like to know whether the message that he receives has really been sent by the claiming node A, let's say, and whether this information on the path has been modified or not. So, but the routing information is still public. So this is typically used for when the information is public, but it's important that it is not altered. The second approach, the encapsulation security protocol, focuses on creating this tunnel. So basically, here we have also a router on the way. It creates a new tunnel, and basically all intermediate nodes are unaware of what's happening. So router 1 and router 2 basically take all traffic that is here in plain text and create some kind of encryption on that so that it's not visible anymore, and authenticate the sender and provide integrity to the data. So basically all intermediate nodes do not see who created the initial message. The messages are encapsulated and they only see R1 to R2 communication. Okay, so what we have also seen now is that, let's say, this router now receives information from source 1, from the router 1, sent to router 2, and probably a specific key has been used. Probably there's some kind of cipher suite that has been selected, so what kind of mechanism, what kind of encryption is used, and so on. And this is some kind of state, so it's required to be stored in a database. And this database is called the database of security association. So one entry there is a security association, and basically it tells how to deal with data that has been protected by IPsec. So which protocol to take, what kind of encryption mechanism to use, what kind of keys to use, so to manage this kind of state information. Because the main reason is that we need this additional database because IP itself is connectionless. That means all messages that are received in that IP layer just check for the destination address, and in order to be able to quickly route it. But in this case, the router itself might be the recipient of the data, and it has to know how to deal with it. So basically it needs to maintain this security association to know how to unpack it, what keys to use in order to allow to further forward it on the extracted packet. Here are some examples. So what does the R1 have to store? So it needs to somehow know some kind of security parameter index which identifies this flow, the origin, the destination, the type of encryption used, encryption key, type of integrity, and authentication key. So basically several keys that are used, so here to verify the identity and here to decrypt the message itself. And as we know, for signatures we use different keys than for encryption. Technically you could use the same key, but practically it is recommended to use different keys, so that if the key is breached and attacked, then you lose only one functionality, such as only the confidentiality or only the authentication, but not both at the same time. Okay, let's have a look at the IPsec datagram structure. So what do we have? First of all, here we have the original data, and there's a padding and a padding length added to it. So basically what is happening is, in order to let's say if we would have a TCP connection, then we would have a continuous byte stream, and that is not sufficient. So we basically want to introduce some kind of integrity checks. So we need to basically cut it in smaller pieces, such as this kind of records. And it might be, it might be that the number of records is just, so one of these records, one of these packages is just too small. And as we know, the symmetric encryption mechanisms, they operate on a fixed length of data. So let's say we have here 10 bytes left, and then we can add 45 or so that we come up with 64 and a specific number of bits that we need, not for the padding, that we need for the authentication. So in the padding, what it does is to add this extra bytes that are needed to be able to compute properly on the available data. Okay, so this is the first part. Then what can be also added? What's also added is the authentication. So basically, once the whole package is there, then we have a function which basically takes a key and takes data and computes the hash of it. So, and this key is only known to the two parties. So basically, if A sends a message to B with some kind of data and tells what kind of hash it has, that data, then B can take that data as well, add his remotely or differently stored key, and compute also a hash, and basically find out whether they are similar, whether they're the same, and then if yes, then B knows that this key has also been used at this point, so that A could compute the hash correctly, and because only somebody with the knowledge of that key could have been used this, and we know that A has that key and only A has that key, we know that A is authenticated. Okay, the second point is we also have sequence numbers and the SPI that already previously introduced, and the sequence number, they make that, let's say if we wouldn't have that and we receive several times the same message, then several times the same message looks also encrypted the same, so we would be able to identify it. But by adding the sequence number, we can identify the doublings and whether messages arrive frequently, or even whether there's so whether they arrive frequently, whether they have the right sequence numbers in the right order, or whether they have been also swapped in the order. Important point is the MACs always assume a shared secret key. They assume that the communication parties have the same key and can compute the same hash function with the key as an input. Okay, let's see. What we want to do is we have R1 and R2, and R2, and basically they want to communicate securely with each other. They want to establish some kind of tunnel, and they have, let's say, they have clarified what kind of keys to use. Okay, let's have a look at the process and how it's used. So what we have here is first that R1 takes the payload and takes the message and encapsulates it totally. Then it adds the ESP trailer, so basically adding the padding, so to make it to a full processable length, and adds the header fields. So I mean, yeah. And then we encrypt it using the algorithm that has been specified and the key specified in the security association. Then the ASP header is added, so adding the sequence number and this SPI. And just to remember, what was the SPI? The security parameter index is basically the reference where in the security association this information lies. It's more like, yeah, a link to the details of the security association. Okay, so that the recipient can also quicker identify it. It's like a flow information, flow identifier. Okay, so then we add the ASP header in front of this encrypted of this, and we create at the end the header, the trailer, so that we basically have all information from here to there. We compute the hash and add in the computation of the hash our pre-established key, so that it will authenticate us and both verify that the integrity of the message has not been breached. Okay, then this MAC, so this message authentication code is added, and then a new IP header is created and sent to R2. What does R2 do? Okay, it checks, aha, this is a message for me. It identifies it's an IPsec message and computes first the hash with the pre-established key as an input to compute basically the message authentication code, and to compare it then with the sent message authentication code. And if they comply, then we know, okay, the computing party, so R1, has the secret key. So he is the person, the machine that he claims to be, because only we two have this key. The second thing is that it verifies, yeah, we will come to this point. So basically, it verifies that the hash is intact, and with that integrity and the authentication of the sending party. Okay, what do we do with the sequence numbers? So every time a new security association is started, we initialize the sequence number to 0, because it's just important that they create a stream of always differing previously to the previous messages, to always deliver a new randomness that does not repeat. And with the sequence numbers, it's very convenient. So we have two purposes: every message will be unique, and second, we can identify gaps in messages. Okay, and every time a datagram is sent on, is received, is sent out from on this specific security association, then we increase the counter and place the increased counter in the sequence number field of the message. And the goal is then to have every message with different, every message to be different. So basically the idea is, if you would send the message hello over UDP, let's say, and hello again, sorry, not UDP, but over TCP, then what we want to do is that these messages are not repeating, are not the same, so we have to add the sequence number. That allows from replaying a packet and from replaying, from sniffing, because every message will then be unique. And if you receive a duplicate, or then if you receive duplicate authenticated IP packets, then we identify that there's some issue going on and we can stop the service. What do? We check for destination checks for duplicates, and we will not be able to track all received packets. That would require a very large memory, but it uses a window basically on the linear scale of potential sequence numbers. We are here. Then in a given radius, we still accept the sequence numbers, but everything that is beyond is too old, and everything that's too that will come in the future is too early. Okay. So then we need basically two databases, as I said. So we have here router 1 and router 2, and they should comply to each other according to the security association that they have. Where is this stored? This is stored in a database called Security Association Database, very creatively. So basically it holds all the SA, and once the message is received, then we check the Security Association Database to decide how to process the datagram. When the message arrives at R2 checks, okay, do I have an entry? What is my policy on this? And takes the SPI, so this identifier, that we have in the message, as we said, as kind of reference, as kind of index to look into the database and identify, this is the right security association, and now I know which kind of keys I have to use, and then can process the data correctly. There's also a second database, the security policy database, which is more dealing with the question how to do something rather than why. So it's more remaining on a larger scale decision. So basically some intent, some kind of flow independent approach. Basically the policy tells if there's a datagram and we need to know how to apply IPsec to it. Basically this how, without the actual parameters, is described in the security policy database. So for example, okay, so let's see what kind of challenges are there. So what information can Trudy derive from the communication? So let's say this is R1, this is Trudy, let's say so, and this is R2, and R1 and R2 establish a tunnel to each other using IPsec. Will Trudy be able to see the original contents of datagram? Depends. So if they use the authentication header, then it's about authentication only, such as for distributing public information, but that should be verified, such as the routing information. But if they use the encapsulation security protocol, then she does not see anything. So basically she just sees communication for R1 to R2, but where it comes from, where it goes, she will not find out. Okay. Source and destination address port, that depends on whether encapsulation is used. If encapsulation is used, then even communication from A to B is not visible to her because it's also encrypted. She just only sees the communication from R1 to R2. The transport protocol, will she know? Yeah, this might be. So it's actually disputable because it depends on how the tunnel is established. Typically that's TCP, and then she learns the transport protocol that TCP is used, but that will not help her so much. And application port, again not, because that's part of the datagram which is fully encrypted. What if you flip bits without their detection? So just as a reminder how the integrity was verified. So the sender computed the data and used his secret key, and that gave a MAC address. No, not the MAC address. It's a MAC message authentication code, which basically has as an input also the secret key. So and if the recipient gets the data, can encrypt it, and has also the secret key, and then also the recipient computes the MAC, and if they both correlate, then it's the same. So that means that the data has not been modified, and the party knowing the secret key is on the other side, namely. And when you only have keys with individuals on a one-to-one basis, then you can exactly know who used his key in order to verify this, to create this MAC. So in short, yes, flip bits are detected. What if somebody else changed R1's IP spoofs to be R1 but is not? Well, because the message authentication code also uses the secret key of R1, and the agent, the malicious node, cannot recreate it. So nobody can masquerade for R1 because the data is authenticated. Can a datagram be answered? Yeah, well, basically it's a communication done from R1 to R2 that appears. So Trudy inserts this message, but as R2's authentication cannot be verified, this message will be dropped. Okay, let's talk about some correlating topic. It's basically how do we know which keys to use. So if this is a security association to be used in IPsec to encrypt data to hash, and therefore also verify the authenticity of the sender, as well as some server IP addresses, so who's the destination, who's the source. We need to somehow think about how to exchange these keys, and for that would be quite impractical if there are too many endpoints. There's this IPsec Internet Key Exchange. Basically, there are two approaches. Either you have a pre-shared secret for the key exchange, where basically you exactly know what key A is using, what key B is using, and so on. And if they want to communicate with you securely, then you want to authenticate on both sides, whether this, let's say, server is also in the possession of the secret part of A's key, and the same also applies for the messages of B. So we also want to see whether the messages of B have been created by B, because only B knows the pre-shared secret key for B. Okay, the second approach would be to use a public key infrastructure, basically certificates verifying who you are and that you are a fine person. So basically it uses then public private key options, and if, let's say, S knows the public key of B through certificates, it can just communicate to it encryptedly, so basically it has already keys established. Okay, so what does it mean? In the pre-shared secret scenario, both sides start with a secret, and knowing the secret authenticates that secret holder. So they can also use the same, but typically a different key is used for encryption, and the authentication is by knowing that the key is only in the hand of us and the second party that we trusted. Using a PKI, then we would need a public-private key pair. It should be widely known, and there's also a verification to whom this private key is associated to. So basically, the certificate takes over the responsibility to verify what the authentication is, who that person is, and giving at hand the public key so that everybody can check whether, corresponding to this public key, the node that we want to authenticate has also private key by signing something, or by encrypting, by signing something. Okay, there are basically two phases. First of all, the establishment of the communication, and to securely negotiate IPsec pairs of security associations. Basically, phase 1 prepares the negotiation. Phase 2 does the negotiation, and as a result we get this the SAs, the security associations. So basically we have a pre-securing step before applying our securing step. Okay, there are two modes. One is main and one is aggressive. It's basically of how many messages are sent. And of course the larger and more flexible one is correlating, but sometimes also the main method is used. So it's basically more the common approach, but for the aggressive mode, if time is the issue, then typically the aggressive mode is good as well, although it opens up some security issues. Okay, let's summarize on this internet key exchange. So this is for to exchange keys for algorithms, secret keys, security policy information, and so it's basically this pointer indexing to the entry in the security association database. It can be used for authentication header and ESP. Again, authentication header provides integrity and authentication, but it's basically used for public information that can be seen by anyone, but it's important to verify who sent it. And the second, it provides just all requirements, so authentication, integrity, and encryption that you can use to communicate to the foreign or other kind of distant networks. Okay, yeah, an IPsec can be found between any kind of nodes to end systems, a router and a firewall, router and firewall, router to router. So this is a very common approach. Okay, let's have a look. So now we want to wrap up with talking about security in wireless and mobile networks. So basically, as here, this is the transport layer security, this is the network layer security, and now we're looking into the link layer, or medium access control. Okay, medium access control. Okay, let's have a look how they work. So what we see here is basically two parts. First, we have the mobile and access point communication, and we have the access point and authentication server communication. What is to be assumed further on is that here are also other access points, so that's not just a single access point. So what we want is to be able to authenticate, okay, this is Alice, and she can log in at any kind of access point. So we have to have this goals. Basically what we can use is to have communication over wireless link. Basically we want to establish here some kind of authentication and encryption. And the first step is to authenticate first Alice to the networks. The access point needs to be sure that this is really Alex before providing her additional features. Okay, what's the first step? First of all, so wants to join and communicates its presence and provides the security capability. So basically, to the access point tells the mobile node what kind of security suite, cipher suite is supported, what kind of protocols and access and symmetric, asymmetric encryption formats are planned to be used. So please note that the mobile devices are already participating in the communication with the access point. They can already receive and send messages to each other, but the device is not yet authenticated. There are no yet encryption keys that can be somehow used for the further communication. So what happens now is, first of all, access point communicates to the mobile device what security cipher suite it supports. Then they agree on what. And basically what happens here is that the mobile device through the access point communicates with the authentication server. And the assumption is that they have already shared common secret, and they use this using the shared secret, using the number used once to prevent reply text and some kind of hashing to encrypt to enforce the integrity of the messages. So, and what you also further want is to send this over to the authentication server. And from this information that we started, we can already so we can talk about it, and then we can derive some symmetric session key that is only valid now. So let's have a look at an example of how this operates. So because now this was 802.11, the standard, and now we focus on wireless privacy 3. So basically there we have the go through the handshake. So the authentication server sends us the number used once, and then we use our previously that's the key that you want to have, and we have an initial shared secret with the authentication service, and we use the nonce and we use this other nonce as well. So basically there are two nonces now involved. And what we also received what we compute, because we can now basically using our nonce. What should be seen here is that this is M star. So basically, we use our nonce as an input in addition to the key that we want to use with the access point. Okay. So we generate the nonce. We generate the secret shared session key, symmetrically shared session key map, and the nonce we used, the nonce we received, and the initial secret shared secret. This will not be transferred. It should be known to the authentication server. And the nonces I can send over, they don't have any value, except that the server can now also derive the right keys, and we sign the hash of our message with a signature using basically the keys that we already used, and especially the initial shared secret, so that if the authentication server receives a message from the mobile node, and it can verify through computing the helm to compute the MAC, the hash-based MAC. So the shared secret can be used by the authentication server to identify, the only node associated to this key I know of is that of the mobile node, so that must be the mobile node. Okay, and then also the authentication server derives the keys from the input nonces and the initial shared secret. Okay, let's see the next steps. Okay, so let's see where we are currently. So we have seen how in the transport layer the secure connections are established. Then we looked into IPsec, so basically how to connect different hosts. And now we look into the link layer or medium access layer, basically where these single hop connections are protected. Let's have a look first at 802.11, so IEEE standard 802.11 Wi-Fi. And there we have also various requirements for authentication and encryption. Basically what we want to do is to authenticate the mobile device, and of course also that the mobile device is sure that the authentication server is that connects to the right network, but also the mobile device should be authenticated, and then to establish a key pair so that the communication to the access point is encrypted. So this is the one-hop link that we are talking about, and we want to provide this. So basically have the communication over the wireless link authenticate to the network. Okay, first of all, what happens is that when the mobile device connects to the SSID, to the access point, the access point advertises its presence and the forms of authentication and encryption that are provided. So basically it tells which kind of security cipher suite it supports. And the device selects from that set of authentication and encryption mechanisms that it wants to use. So up to now, they can already exchange messages. So the device is not yet authenticated. It's just able to negotiate basically the terms for the security properties. They don't have encryption keys, the mobile device is not authenticated, so we just are in a negotiation phase. Okay, as a second step, what the mobile device can do is to communicate with the authentication server, which is somewhere remote in the wired network. So basically, there's some kind of tunneling protocol that allows to communicate through this authentication server in order to provide the credentials and the information that is needed to authenticate the mobile device. The assumption here is that the authentication server and the mobile device have already a shared common secret. So there's already some credentials that both of them know, and only both of them know. So what the mobile both now will do is to derive a shared symmetric key, which is then further used for all security related key derivation and further on processes. So what it does, it uses the shared secret numbers used once, and cryptographic hashing to authenticate each other. The authentication comes from the point that they assume that only the other party knows the common secret. So there are only two parties who know these secrets. That's the authentication server, which the client uses this information that the authentication server is the only other device knowing the secret, and the mobile device knows the secret, which the authentication server uses as information to verify the authenticity of the mobile device. And then basically both of them derive symmetric session keys. So they have basically the basis for the security are numbers used once and the shared secret. Let's see how this happens in 802.11 in the Wi-Fi Protected Access 3 protocol, so WPA 3, and how the handshake looks like. So first of all, there's this access point supported tunnel so that both can communicate. The authentication server sends a nonce, so number used once, and the mobile device now generates also local mobile number used once. It takes the symmetric shared it generates symmetric shared session key by using the nonce from the authentication server, its own generated nonce, and the initial secret. So, and what it sends is basically its own nonce and the confirmation that it's basically a hash which uses the common key as an input that is required to create the same hash at the other side. So basically, this is hidden. This is already sent here, and the recipient authentication server can reproduce the same hash, and then basically verify that the mobile node knows this key. So basically this is what happens. So basically both parties have exchanged their nonces in plain text and have used to create the hash that uses the common shared secret. If this message is captured, with this nonce, how truly is, or the attacker cannot do anything. These are just random numbers, and this hash is also some random information which is meaningless without knowing the secret. So what does the authentication server do? It basically derives the same key, session key, that the mobile device derived here by using the same information. Again, this is public and this is secret. And then both have the same key now derived. And this key is their temporary, current, and fresh, basically, key that they use for this communication. And what has also been happening, when the authentication server verifies that the hash is correct, the authentication server is confirming that the mobile device knows the shared secret and therefore is authenticated. So let's see how does it again look like in this process. So we had this discovery of security capabilities, then we had the mutual authentication by verifying to each other that they both have the secret hidden, the shared secret the shared secret, and they derive the key, the common key. And what they do now is to create some session key by basically deriving it from this common key that they computed in step number 2. So the key that they computed here, this K map, they don't use for encryption. What they do, so this is what they do is they they derive from that further keys, session keys, that they, for example, can also periodically refresh based on the new derivation. But let's say if this shared symmetric session key that is derived is spoiled and lost and somehow corrupted, then still the original key is not attacked. So what the authentication server does now is to provide the access point with the shared symmetric session key, so that this symmetric key can now be used in the one-to-one communication between access point and the mobile device. So, and because they have now both this symmetric session key established, they can now communicate bidirectionally securely. So now encrypted communication over Wi-Fi takes place. The mobile device has been authenticated. There has been a new key derived and delivered to the access point and derived by the mobile device that is used for encrypted communication. So everything is fine, and they can communicate now properly, and the mobile device is authenticated. I have said that the mobile device is able to communicate without encryption to the access point in the first step to negotiate, and also during the step 2 or 3 communicate with the authentication server. For that, there's some kind of encapsulation protocol which is called extensible authentication protocol, which basically allows to have end-to-end request response between the mobile device and the authentication server. So actually the mobile device is not yet authenticated, but still with this protocol it is able to send a packet through the authenticated server. So it's not able to select the destination where it goes to, but basically it has to use the protocols that are provided and can only communicate with the authenticated server back and forth. There's further radius, the radius protocol involved. Radius is very prominent as it allows to a server to create some kind of key and deliver it to the access point or to some other device, and this key is then used for the purposes of the access point in this case, but basically the key is derived from somewhere else and delivered to the entity, to the agent that is now using it, to the access point. This is typically happening in the wired network. This is typically happening wirelessly. Okay, let's finish up with the quick look on 4G and 5G, so how nodes are authenticated there and how the communication is there encrypted. So what we have here is the mobile device that needs to be authenticated in order to be able to use the services of the base station. So basically, let's assume you have a specific SIM card that allows you to to phone without charge using a flat rate in different countries. So when the mobile device now wants to make a call, it has to be registered and verified that it is allowed to make this call, that there's sufficient resources, so the budget is sufficient to make this call and to clarify the rights. So a new arriving mobile must do the following. First, it must associate with the base station, so to establish a communication over 4G wireless link, and authenticate itself to the network, and also authenticate the network to make sure that the network is also some trusted environment. What is different to Wi-Fi? The SIM card is some element that contains information to which the user doesn't have access. So this is a trusted device that the user carries around and that can be used in the process, what you don't have in the Wi-Fi. So in the Wi-Fi, typically devices are connecting to the access point which are in the full control of the user, and therefore that can be altered, can be modified, but a SIM card cannot be modified, cannot be altered. So it provides a global identity and contains shared keys. and especially shared keys are not accessible to the user. Okay. And the services, and in the other contrast to Wi-Fi, in Wi-Fi we have typically just one single service. You connect to the access point and you want to send and receive messages. But here we have various paid service subscriptions, such as whether you are allowed to call numbers in different countries, what kind of telephone plan you have, whether you have to be charged for it or not. So basically, and this is all stored in the home network. So your home telephony provider's network, but you're currently often in a visited network, so somewhere around, not in the network of your home. So let's see how this can be organized. Okay. So how does it work? So first of all, the mobile and the base station use derived session keys. Again, here they have some session keys that are only temporarily valid to encrypt the communications over the 4G network. So what do we have? So first of all, this one link is relevant, and we have some home subscriber service which knows everything about the client, about the mobile device, what kind of service plan it has, and has to be asked whether the specific services that the mobile device wants to use are permitted. The ultimate authenticator, which tells whether the node can join or not, is the home subscriber service. Basically, the home telephony provider, which tells whether the SIM card is still valid, whether the contract is still valid, whether the service is still supported for the caller. And the mobility management entities, basically, they are some kind of database for visitors that log into the networks of this visited network. But are not managed by the ISP, by the telephony service provider. But between here, there's some kind of trust that they operate properly, so there are trust and business relationship between the visited and the home networks. Okay, let's see what happens here. So first of all, there's an attachment of the base station, of the client to the base station. Then at the base station, so this is now very simply shown, but typically there's some kind of tree structure where there are also other base stations and where there are further networks involved. But however, these base stations and the the network elements in the background are connected to the operators of this network's operators mobility management entity. So there is some link, there's some communication possible to the mobility management. And what happens? So first of all, they are all attaching to each other, and the mobile basically sends the information from the SIM card, so the globally unique IMSI, so the identification number of the SIM card, and what kind of further information are available. And it asks for authentication and tells, okay, here is now a request in this visited network. Please, dear home network, verify that I'm allowed to use this network. So it tells who the client is and which network it visits. So for example, if you are abroad and you are not allowed to make a call to different countries, then of course it's relevant in which network you're currently logged in. So, and this message is then relayed from the base station to the visited mobility management entity, and from there to the home subscriber service. Okay, now the request has came in, and now there's a response. Basically, there's an authentication token and some expected response token. So basically, the home subscriber service uses a secret key that is stored on the SIM card, and also of course known to the home subscriber station. It uses this key to derive a new authentication token. So this is secret and only known to the home subscriber service and the mobile device. And it uses it to, so for example, it's a function that uses that key to derive the authentication token. And it also tells basically the expected response. So now, what does the auth token contain? It contains encrypted information using this specific key, allowing the mobile to know that whoever computed the auth token knows this shared in advance secret. So basically it tells that it is an entity allowed to make a decision on him and to that the communication takes place with the home network. Okay. What you further have, the mobile has an authenticated network, so it knows now that for this auth token creation, the commonly shared secret has been used, and that can only be some representative of the home network. Okay, let's see what we use this for. So this is stored in the home subscriber station. Okay, what's the response? The response is computed using the same secret key to make same cryptographic calculations than the home subscriber service did, to compute this basically expected answer and sends it to this mobility management entity. So what's the difference now? The difference now is that the client also, or the mobile device also uses the secret key to compute something that can be verified later by the home subscriber service as a verification that the mobile device really had access to the secret key. So how is the authentication working? The MMS, just to say, so this reply is stored by the mobility management entity and compared to the reply by the mobile device, and if they match, then the mobile is authenticated. Why is that so? This is so because the home subscriber service computed this X, the expected result, as a function of involving the key. So the secret key, and the answer of the mobile device is also using the same, commonly to only those two known key. So that means because a key, such a key is only known to two parties, namely the mobile device and the home subscriber service. So if both match and the mobility management entity trusts the home subscriber service, then this mobile device is verified. So once it's verified, authenticated, it tells it, and it generates, so the mobility management entity generates now keys for the base station that should be used in the one-to-one communication. Okay, then the base station has received this information from the mobility management entity that everything went fine and there should be new keys derived, and the base station determines now the keys for encrypting data, control frames over 4G wireless networks, and IS as an encryption can also be used. But the main idea here is that now the base station is getting also involved and can derive some keys which are then used in communication with the client. Okay. And obviously, I mean, we are talking just about this one-hop communication that is encrypted, and the base station has now the keys to communicate encryptedly with the mobile device. Okay, what's the difference between 4G and 5G? First of all, there's in 4G and the previous two generations, typically the mobility management entity makes the decisions eventually who can join. In 5G, the home network provides the authentication decision, and the MME just plays the middleman, can still reject, but typically the decision is taken by the home network. 4G uses shared keys in advance. It's a little bit outdated. Just imagine the scale and how the secrets can be stored, so it's really problematic. Nowadays, in 5G, they are not shared in advance, but they use public cryptography, and that is more scalable. Also, the identity of the device has been transmitted in clear text to the base station. And this might reveal some information about the client which is not desired. So if you use public keys and encrypted IMSI, then typically, then the identity of the client is not revealed. Okay, just to summarize, what did we look at? So we looked at cryptography, basically symmetric and asymmetric cryptography, and message integrity, and came also then to the hash functions in order to not always operate with the whole data. It is sufficient to create a hash of the data and to sign this one. So this because the data and the hash of the data are almost identical. So it's not identical in that sense. If you have a hash, it should be impossible with realistic resource investment to create another data with the same hash. And this can be then signed, or it can be encrypted with the public key, which is the same. With private key. And everybody who has a public key can then verify the signature. Look at various use cases such as TLS, IPsec, and the one-hop communication and Wi-Fi and how it is secured. And with that, we went through the various layers and how to secure them. So again, sorry for the technical issues. I hope that I will be able to cut the video properly. See you then next week. Thank you very much.